I've been blessed to be blessed by Coach and his encouragement, his words of wisdom, his knowledge, and I've just always watched from afar and always a guy I've looked up to in this business, and a guy who's always had just such a positive reputation, positive effect on other people, just a consummate pro and a winner. Has won everywhere he's been. So we're excited to have him on. I think he's going to have some great nuggets and insight for us. 25 plus years of coaching, Division I, played Division I. Um, 10 NCAA tournament appearances, which is a deal in your career when you can do that, is major. And has worked for several great coaches and has also coached several great players, several NBA players. So without further ado, Coach Broussard, excited to have you. Hello.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be here. This is good.
So we'll go ahead and get kicked off. So we will do kind of an interview form, just kind of hanging out, talking ball, letting Coach share a lot of wisdom and a lot of nuggets with us. And at the end of it, we'll open up for questions for anybody who has them for Coach. But we'll just kind of go through a line of questions. So first and foremost, everybody's kind of in this stay-at-home, quarantine, shelter in place. It's definitely different than we've ever seen. But how has this been for you, and what have you been up to during this time, Coach?
Well, let me start by saying, can everybody hear me? Is it clear? Because the connection on my end is kind of waffling a little bit. Can everybody hear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're good. Okay. This quarantine has been a little interesting. I think we've all kind of experienced sort of a little bit of a pause in life, especially because it came so abruptly at the end of our seasons. But I've tried to take a positive spin on it. I don't know when I've had this kind of time to just sit and reflect without always wanting to keep going and moving and always being in motion. So it's actually been pretty good for my family and I. And I've learned a lot about myself in these moments. A lot of Zoom calls, man. So many Zoom calls. Sometimes I get Zoom exhaustion. So it's been a real fruitful time, man. It gets zoomed out, man. But it's been good. I've had a chance to reflect on some things that I can do better, and reconnect with people in the business in particular that I hadn't had a chance to do for a long time, and sit back and listen to a lot of TED Talks and podcasts, and just try to get better, and then also too connecting with our players on a whole different level. I think that's really been fun for me, seeing that I've only been at TCU for a year, and still getting to know the players on a more intimate and deeper level. So that's been great. It's been great.
What would you say, Coach, is something that you will keep with you now that COVID-19's happened and we've had to do all this learning and adjusting and all of that? What would you say something that you'll keep with you even as we kind of go back to transition to this new normal? What would you say something I think away from the COVID that you'll keep with you?
Yeah, I think just reaffirming the importance of balance in one's life, and whether that's being more intentional about spending time with my wife and listening to her, because I think that's extremely important. Reaching out more to my parents. I think that'll be key to this. Being back in Texas, because this is my home. I think being in a position to listen more to our players in particular, because there's so much going on in the world that they're trying to process right now. Yep. And just being that listening ear, and hopefully, a voice of reason and safety for our young players. I think those are the areas that I'll take from this experience. And then I think the last thing is self-reflection and just trying to get better. And you don't need a lot of time to get better at anything. You just need to be intentional about how you organize your time to get it done. And so that's what I would take from this experience.
For sure. No, that's great stuff, Coach. Mm-hmm. Great stuff. So switching gears on the lighter note, tell us something fun or funny that you've learned about yourself or your family since you've been locked in the house for as long as we all have.
I'm a pretty good.
I know you got some
player.
voice, Coach. Don't hold
No,
out.
I'm a pretty good video game player. I'm a pretty good video game player. You know, I'm pretty good at that. What I don't like though is I don't like the multiplayer where I'm on a game with everybody from around the world, right? Because I just don't know the languages. So I just like to go solo a lot. So that's pretty good. And I'm a lot more handier than I thought, you know, fixing things around the house. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's been good for me. That's been good for me. Now I have probably created more work for myself because now my wife feels this greater sense to call on me in those areas, but that's okay too. That's okay too.
So you're Tim the Tool Man now. What did you fix, if you don't mind?
Oh my gosh!
What's one thing you fixed?
Well, you know, one of the things is our shelving in our house, right? Our shelving, because, you know, at the early stages of the pandemic, no one was coming to your house, and I couldn't really go out as much. So, you know, I had to end up standing in line one day at Home Depot, and going in there and getting the materials, and then reading the instructions and getting the right tools, and putting some shelving in our house, because when my kids came back, we had to find more storage. So we had to make space.
Nice.
So that's you know, that's been an adventure in of itself. It's been pretty good.
Nice. And so on the video game, on your multiplayer, Coach, what's your video game? Are you a Call of Duty guy? Are you
you know what? I stopped playing Call of Duty.
NBA 2K? What's your?
I try to stay away from the sports games because I'm in sport. So the Call of Duty stuff, man, the Call of Duty for me was just, it just moved way too fast, right? I couldn't deal with it. So I play a game called Division, and it's on the Xbox and the PlayStation platform. And essentially what it is I'm like a cop all by myself in the middle of a pandemic, both in Washington, D.C. and New York. And I go around and I try to maintain order. And I love it. I love it. So that's what I do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
So tell everybody in the call. So obviously we're getting to know you, Coach. Everyone in the room. Tell everyone a little bit about how you started playing ball. We know you played at Bradley, but tell us a little bit about your playing background that led to your coaching background.
Yeah. Well, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Texas. My father and mother are both from Louisiana, and prior to me coming into the world, my dad was in the military, and he was stationed over in Germany in the Air Force a long time ago. Well, he decided that when it was time to move back to the States, we were going to move to a place where the jobs were plentiful, and he was close to his mother and father, and my mother was close to her mother and father. So Houston, Texas became home because it was strategically located between Shreveport, Louisiana, and New Iberia, Louisiana. Okay, so it became home, and you know, we moved back to the States when I was 3 years of age. And kind of fast forwarding, my dad got a job in juvenile probation, so my mother was a middle school teacher, PE teacher, and so, you know, on occasion, my mother would bring a football home or a baseball home or a basketball home, just to see if I would have interest. And my dad would come by and sort of emphasize each of those sports. So, but on this particular day, he comes by and I had a basketball in my hand, and he just said one thing to me, B. He said, all right, now if you pick that ball up, then you got to understand that you're going to be a great ball handler, because being a guard, because I guess at the time he didn't think I was going to be 7'2", he figured I'd have to learn how to dribble the basketball. So that's kind of how that started. That was probably, I don't know, I may have been 4 or 5 years of age. Okay. So I took that and sort of ran with it. I had a little bit of stint as a swimmer, but that didn't work out too well. So I just continued to play basketball. So all through high school, or all through middle school and high school, you know, worked on my skills and really enjoyed the game. And it was also a way to connect with my father. My mother at the time, in the evenings when she was not teaching at Fondren Middle School in Houston, Texas, She had a part-time job at the Summit, which is where the Rockets used to play. So I was a ball boy for the Rockets for 9 years. So, you know, I had pros that I was able to watch all the time, up close and personal, and sort of emphasize and learn from them how to play the game. And that was a phenomenal experience. I had high school coaches, Gary Nichols, who was my high school coach, who has now since retired, instilled great wisdom in the game and spent a lot of time with me on my skills. So I had gotten to the point where, you know, like a lot of the kids that we recruit, you know, I had gotten some recognition and thought maybe, you know, at the end of my high school career, it would be nice to leave the state for a minute to see kind of what life is like elsewhere. And then I went to Bradley. You know, I went to Bradley and played 4 years. I wasn't the greatest of players, you know, on the court with the stats. But it was a very rewarding experience for me to get an education, to play with teammates that I love to this day, and also as a bridge to get into the profession that I love so much. So that's kind of how it started, you know.
No, that's great. Appreciate you sharing that, Coach. Now, would you say, looking back when you came up and you were recruited and you went through the recruiting process, is there anything that you took from that process that you kind of use now, either do's or don'ts, you would say?
Yeah, I would. Really good question, B. You know, I think it's important in the recruiting process for coaches to get to know your parents, to get to know your high school coaches, and to be truthful, you know, and to give you accurate information. I think that's extremely important. And I would encourage every young coach out there to have a sense of integrity about what they're doing, and particularly now because our profession is under siege. You know, it's under siege. And I'd also would encourage coaches just to try to build deeper and more meaningful relationships, and to have a better idea of how to evaluate players, because when you bring somebody from their home to your team, there's got to be a fit. You know, there's got to be a way to integrate players and to create cohesion. And I think you do that by the depth of the relationship. So that's what I would stress.
No, that's good. That's good. So knowing your story, share a little bit of how you got into coaching and how you actually had your eyes set on some other really high level opportunities that most coaches don't have opportunities to go do.
Yeah.
Coming out and finishing their playing career, and what made you choose coaching over those other opportunities?
Yeah. Well, coaching was something that really was not on my radar. And, you know, I went to school and studied history and sociology and criminal justice. And my thought then was to somehow make it and get into the FBI. That's what I initially wanted to do. My father was in law enforcement. My mother eventually left middle school coaching, and she was in law enforcement. So that was a part of my fabric, okay? And so I figured I wanted to take it to another level. So I had aspired to be an FBI agent and had worked towards that. What ended up happening my senior year, I was being recruited by the Secret Service, the United States Secret Service, because I figured if I couldn't get into the FBI after graduation, because I'm not so sure that my educational background was going to let me do that, because at the time they were taking more accountants and biology people and lawyers, and I didn't quite have that. So I started being recruited by the Secret Service, but at the same time, my college coach, the second semester of my senior year, started talking to me more about the coaching profession. And I'd say I had no interest whatsoever, because I just didn't know what it was all about. You know, there was no blueprint. There was no courses that I took. I just didn't feel comfortable. All right. So fast forward to graduation. I graduated on May 15th, and I was traveling back home to Houston, and I was all but for sure going to be a Secret Service agent. I was actually going back home to stay there for about a week, and then was going to go get processed and go start a career, you know. And I had some other things, and I had applied to law school because I just thought that's what you should do with my educational background. Well, lo and behold, I get home. I'm home for 2 days, and my college coach tells me, Coach Jim Molinari, who, you know, is my man. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him in so many different ways and levels. He's now a coach at Oklahoma. in the same conference, by the way. So that's a very unique situation. But he called me after 2 days of being at home, and he said, "Hey, vacation's over. It's time for you to start your career. I need you to come back up here right away." This is 2 days. I graduated on a Saturday, and on a Monday, he's telling me that. So Tuesday, from Hobby Airport in Houston, Texas, I had a plane ticket waiting for me. I got on the plane, and I went back and I started my career. That's how it happened. And I became the director of operations for him. And then that's kind of how it all started. He just said, "This is what you're going to do. No questions asked." And I feel very fortunate that he was able to see in me something that has allowed me to have a fair amount of success 25 years later. And I really appreciate that about him.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. He saw something in you, and it's worked out because you're still doing it and doing it at a high level.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I don't know what you would have been like as a Secret Service agent, but I'm glad you're a coach.
Yeah. Well, I was going to end up taking some bullets, and I think, that would have been literally taking bullets. But, in our career as college coaches, figuratively, we take bullets too. And I'm well equipped for that. Well equipped for that. Yeah.
So let's switch gears. Let's talk about TCU a little bit. Let's talk some TCU questions. You've been there now for one season, right? Correct, Coach?
Yeah, one season. So, about a year and let's say 3 weeks or so. That's how long I've been here.
Yep. Very good. Coming from UCLA. So you've been a lot of different places, UCLA, New Mexico, Bradley. You've been in the tournament. You've seen the highs and the highs of this business. What do you think makes TCU a special place? Obviously, the Big 12, and we know about Fort Worth, and Coach Dixon does a great job everywhere he's been, especially at TCU. So just curious for everybody else, what do you think it is that makes them special?
Well, I didn't know this initially about TCU when I came here, but TCU at one time was in the Mountain West Conference. And so when I was at New Mexico, we played TCU. And, when you go on a road trip, you don't really get a chance to see much about the place other than the gym and maybe a hotel. So when I came back to get hired last year and walked around the campus and had a chance to talk with Coach Dixon and meet the people here, I was astonished. I was amazed. I was amazed at the level of commitment that TCU has to the student-athlete experience, from facilities to resources, its location in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I think its leadership, all those areas, I think, make it an outstanding place to be for me. It was a match that I wasn't expecting it to be great, but it's turned out to be really, really good, really, really good. And I think it's one of the few places where, you have a private school setting, so there is there's a commitment to academics, but it's not often where you have a private school setting with also big time, college athletics. And I think that's what makes this place special. And it's a place, in particular with basketball, there's not a whole lot of history, right? There's not a whole lot of history here, particularly in basketball. So you have a chance to build that history. You have a chance to build that legacy. And at this particular stage in my career, personally, I like to be in that place. Coming from UCLA, that's the complete opposite. That's the complete opposite. I was in a place at UCLA that had probably arguably the best history of any college basketball program, okay? And so with that, there's a lot of good things, but there's also some expectations that you're just not going to overcome, right? You're just not going to overcome. Well, here, because there isn't any real expectation, because there isn't any real history right now, we have a chance to be a trailblazer, not only as a coaching staff, but even the players that we recruit and bring in here. That's a major selling point. Come here, learn, grow, make your own way. Make your own way. And I think that's important, in particular for young men in this day and age.
No, that's well said, Coach. Very well said. And being somebody who's from the Metroplex, graduated high school from the Metroplex, it's been awesome to see what Coach Dixon's been able to get going further from the moment he stepped on campus the first year in the NIT and getting him back to the tournament. And we know more great things are ahead. And Coach Dixon actually played there, so we know that place means something special to him.
Right.
He's obviously been at Pitt and had enormous success there. What do you think it is about Coach Dixon that has made him be such an elite coach for such a long period of time? What's three reasons you would say if you had to say?
Well, I think the first is this idea of how he's been able to create a trajectory of success. A trajectory of success, meaning that when you look at his track record as a coach, he's been on the rise and has been able to sustain a high level of winning. Okay. Well, there's a reason behind that. Okay. And in just a short time, I've noticed one of the reasons I think he's been able to do that is because he understands the welfare of the student athlete to a high degree. Okay. In athletic departments within the profession that we work in, we have marketing departments, we have academics, we have facilities, but at the bottom, the bottom line is that the student athlete to me is the most important aspect. And I think he's done a really good job of that. Okay. And making sure that the student athlete has everything he needs to be successful. I think that's extremely important. And the second thing I would say, and this is a critical touch point, okay, a critical touch point for me, is I think he's valued adaptability over flexibility, okay? In other words, I think when you're flexible, I think that speaks to how much you tolerate. But I'm not so sure you really change when you're flexible. But adaptability, that's a whole nother level, okay? That's a wholesale change from within. And when he was at Pitt, and this is what I'm saying to you, when he was at Pitt, he played a different way than he now plays at TCU. Okay. So somewhere in there, he figured out, okay, in order for me to remain relevant and continue to do what I like to do, I got to make some changes. And so he was able to do that. And I respect that. And I think in our business, we have to be able to do that. We always have to, and I may say this over and over again during this talk, but we got to be able to change, or we got to be able to learn and grow at the rate of change. And I think he's been able to do that. Okay. I think the third thing, and I wrote some things down because I want to make sure that I'm saying this correctly. The third thing is he has extreme energy, Brian. He's got extreme energy to hold people accountable. All right. He's a coach. He has a certain philosophy. He has a certain vision, a certain style, okay? Unless you work your players and your staff to believe in that vision, okay, to carry out what it is you're trying to get to, then you probably won't have a ton of success. You'll probably make decisions that are not suited to your style of play. You'll recruit a certain way that may not help you sustain high levels of success. But if you have an energy and a conviction, okay, about what it is you want to do, then chances are you're going to be successful. So I think he has energy in that area that in the short time that I've known him, really, in my opinion, is unmatched by anybody that I've worked for. I mean, it's extreme, and I love that about it. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, those things definitely make you successful. That makes perfect sense. Tell us about the staff that you work with, and tell us something about the staff and the staff cohesion or the staff chemistry or whatever it may be that most people wouldn't know.
Well, I think the one obvious that sticks out is that Ryan Miller and Tony Benford also worked at New Mexico. We all worked at New Mexico at some point, right? Tony worked at New Mexico, I think it was in the early 90s or late 90s. And then I came in the early 2000s, and I was there actually under two staffs. And then Ryan came with Steve Alford, okay? So I think that's one of the reasons why we all feel pretty good about our staff, because we all have familiarity with each other. We all respect each other's ability. We all celebrate each other's successes in our profession. And I think we share similar values. And I think we all have a sort of a continued desire to make sure that Jamie is the most successful coach that he can be at this level. And I think that's why it's working. It's working. I think it's working well.
Right. That's good. If you don't mind me asking too, Coach, for yourself, how do you think that you've been able to be so great amongst so many different staffs and fit in? Because every different staff has a different dynamic. Every staff has different egos or different responsibilities. How have you been great personally at being able to just kind of blend and adapt, like you said about Coach Dixon, to so many different staffs that you've been on?
Well, let me just say this, B. I appreciate the compliment. Being great, that is a moniker that I would never say about myself. But I appreciate you saying that. Okay. I will say this.
Just to cut you off, I think most people in the profession, I know you're very humble, Coach. Most people in the profession would say the same. And it's a testament to the places that you've been that's a true statement. So sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good. But I would tell you along those lines, I think you have to always realize that as an assistant coach, whoever you work for, whatever school you work for, whatever environment you're in, that environment, I mean, you're a part of something that's much bigger than yourself, right? It's much bigger than yourself. And so I think with that in mind, I think whatever skills you have, whatever experiences you have, whatever you bring to the table, whatever your equity is, okay, whatever your capital is, okay, you have to bring that to the table, okay, with the sole purpose of building someone else's house. You're building someone else's house, okay? You're building the head coach's house that you work for, okay? And I say that figuratively, but literally what I mean is, whatever your strength is, okay, whether it's recruiting, whether it's X's and O's, whether it's relationships, whatever it takes for the success of the entire organization, I think that's what you have to concern yourself with. And I think no matter where I've been, I feel like I've done a pretty good job of that, okay, of blending in and taking everything that I know, my internal strengths, my experiences, and making sure that the head coach that I work for has a high level of success, okay? And I think my track record proves that. Now, I'll say this for young coaches out there. I've also had failures, but that's okay too. You have to learn from those situations. But for the most part, answering your question, I think that's what it is. I think the humility comes in knowing that you're a part of something that's much larger than yourself, and you got to contribute to the success as a whole by what you bring to the table.
No, it's great. You said equity. I think that's a great word to use for young coaches and all coaches, just to know what value do you bring, and then building someone else's house is a great philosophy, great approach. I love that. And definitely as young coaches, middle of your career coaches, at any point in time in this business, you can kind of make it about yourself and not mean to. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really powerful that you said that about building someone else's house. We'll shift gears. The last 4 things on TCU. So what's one thing that you love about TCU and what you guys do, letting us in some inside offensively? What's one thing you love? Then we'll go defensively, then we'll go culture, then we'll go in recruiting. So we'll start first with what's one thing you love that you guys do offensively at TCU, whether the practice or games?
Yeah, well, and I'll say just philosophically, whether it's practice or games, I think we do a really good job of spacing in our offense. I think Jamie does a really good job of teaching spacing, timing, and precision. I think that helps our young men understand how to play without having to script how to play. You know what I mean? I think it helps them to make better decisions. And I think, again, going back to what I said earlier about extreme energy, that's an area where he has extreme energy. Every day we're doing something to better improve the mechanics of our spacing, and how we punish and reward behaviors that either work for the spacing or work against it, extreme energy in that area. So he does a really good job of that. And I appreciate that huge about him. And I'm coming from a system where, I coached under Steve Alford, who was a phenomenal motion coach. And I kind of thought I knew everything there was to know about it. But coming to TCU, I've added something else to my bag of tricks, which I appreciate. And I think defensively,
Yep.
just moving
That's awesome.
forward, moving forward defensively, I think the intensity level at which we compete, okay, we at times this year, we were outmatched, but our kids never stopped playing, okay? And no matter what happened in games, the next day or the next day we come to practice, our intensity level was always consistent. I love that. I love that. Again, it points back to extreme energy, okay, from Coach Dixon and how he was able to communicate that, okay? And so that's kind of what I got because, I mean, you know, either you're going to play pack line or you're going to either force baseline or, you know, you're going to down the sides on ball screens, you're going to trap the post, whatever. We all have different schemes, but to me, the energy behind that is what is most important. Can you get your kids every day to work on those things? And that's what I love. I think we had a high level of sustainable intensity, okay? I think culturally, I think it's how we were able to celebrate our achievements. You know, there were some metrics in place after every game and every practice that helped to enforce our culture by the things that our young men would do. Okay, they would get recognized for diving on the floor for loose balls, or helping the helper in defense, or making the right pass, or high-fiving, you know, a person for doing something good or being encouraging. I love the way we celebrate achievement. I love that. Okay. And what was the last one?
In recruiting, what's one thing you love about what you guys do in recruiting?
Well, I think there is there's a desire from Jamie Dixon on down to make sure that we get the right fit. We get the right fit in recruiting, okay? We typically try to recruit what we don't have, and that's a general recruiting philosophy, okay? But Jamie, to me, is more patient than most that I've been with, and he really likes to delve into whether it's the analytics of how a person takes shots, what his high school coach is saying, what his AAU coach is saying, getting to know his parents, getting to know the kids, and I appreciate that. So that moving forward, whenever a young man decides he wants to commit and be a part of our team, then I think it's a much better fit. So I think we do a pretty decent job of that in the first year that I've been there. I think we've been able to identify in the recruiting process young men that fit what we're trying to do. I can't speak for what has gone on in the past. I just know what's happening now, and I think that's been a really good thing to witness.
Right, that's awesome. That's awesome. You know, I think it goes without saying, Coach, you being a Texas guy, being back home in Texas, and just being such a relational guy. I would ask this question as we shift away from TCU and kind of shift more on you and your career reflections, lessons, and some insights you have. Just kind of from a recruiting standpoint, I think some of it is natural. I can tell what you've done with me, and people that I know that you have relationships with have been just such a positive person and such a positive light to people. But what do you think it is for yourself that's enabled you to make? Because people say relationships a lot. What do you think it is for yourself that's helped you be so successful at establishing relationships, connecting to young people, and then just building that trust? What would you say for yourself? I know I'm kind of going off the grid, but I think
no. This is good. This is good. No. I appreciate this. Well, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you, Brian, or to anybody who's on this call. All right, but you know, I think in decision making, you have to have a framework. Okay, and I'm going somewhere with this. You got to have a framework for how you make decisions and how you go about developing relationships. Okay, I've ascribed to the framework of what I call the 4 C's in building relationships. The 4 C's: compassion, consistency, okay, congruence, and competence. And I'll explain all of them. Compassion, obviously, having a listening ear and listening with empathy. That's compassion, okay? Trying to understand the player, trying to understand where the player is coming from, okay? Trying to understand where the coach is coming from and the parents are coming from. That's compassion. To me, that's first and foremost. We have to be in it for people, okay? Not because the people can come to your school and win and you get these big time contracts and you go on to the highest level. No, you got to be in it for the right reasons, okay? All right? I think, and in no particular order, I think you also have to be competent at what you do, all right? We're all coaches, all right? The bottom line is that a player might like you for who you are, the clothes you wear, how you talk to them, what your hair is all about. But here's the deal. When a player comes to your school, based on what you have said to them, okay, and their parents have allowed that to take place, they need to get better at whatever it is. They need to get better, whether it's shooting, dribbling, rebounding, whatever, okay? And as a coach, you have to be competent in those areas, because when you can't deliver, then I think that's when the lack of trust happens. Yep. And I think kids feel less sense of a cohesion, and you can't integrate them quickly. So I think that's extremely important, and not just stuff on the court, all right? I think being competent in areas off the court, developmental issues, whether it's, money, academics, life, whatever the case is, okay? All right? I think consistency, all right? This job is every day. Every day. It's an everyday deal. And some might say, well, how do you do that every single day? Well, I'll tell you how. Because you love what you do. That's the fuel. Okay? That's the extreme energy. That's the fuel. You have to love what you do. Do you know that there was a study done in Forbes magazine, and it said that 76% of people in jobs today are misaligned? That means that you got 76 of the working population in jobs they don't want to be in. And I'm going to tell you right now, as a coach, I enjoy what I do because I love what I do. Okay? I love what I do. Okay? So that fuels that consistency, period. Okay? Period. And then the last thing is congruence. Congruence to me is nothing more than integrity. So if you say you're going to do something and you say you're going to be somewhere, then that's where you got to be. That's where you got to be, okay? Because there may be times, Brian, when you recruit somebody who, when you think about their past, all those areas I just mentioned were void. None of that took place. So now you're dealing with a person who is struggling because there's a deficit of trust, right? There's a deficit of trust, all right? So what do you have to do? You have to carry out your business every single day with that particular student athlete or all of your student athletes in a systematic way so that they know you care for them. You want to make sure they have the best resources. You want to make sure that you can answer questions they may have and get them better. And you want to make sure that they believe when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And they want to know that you're going to show up every single day for them, every single day. Okay. So that's probably a long answer. Sorry, I just had to say that.
No, great answer. Yeah. Great answer. I mean, I think there's a ton of nuggets in there for all of us on this call, and great that you have a philosophy, because it seems like with as much success as you've had with, for those that don't know, recruiting NBA players like Granger and many others that you've coached and recruited, just to be able to have a formula to that is very powerful. It speaks to your consistency. So salute to you on that.
Thank you.
What are 3 things you would say today, the today you, what would you say to the younger you who was just starting a business, who just turned down going to the Secret Service, and now you're getting into this thing? What's 3 things that you would, what points of advice you would give?
Well, first is, I think no matter which direction you want to take, you have to have a direction, right? You have to have something that you see in front of you. You have to have a vision of where you want to go, okay? And I try to keep things simple. And so I like to say that you have to be there before you get there. You have to be there before you get there. You have to be able to see it, okay, before you get there, okay? I think that's extremely important. We have to have a vision about where it is we want to go, because then I think you start to build that vision with ingredients that are necessary for you to achieve the vision, okay? And I'm just talking from the perspective of an assistant coach. I haven't been a head coach, so I want to make that clear too. I'm just talking from that perspective with the hopes that maybe someday I'll have an opportunity to do that. But even as a head coach, that would be the first thing that I do, would be able to to reflect on, okay, where do I want to go? Where do I want to be? What am I trying to accomplish here? Okay. And I think the second thing, in no particular order, I think there has to be a character component. Okay. A character component. So what is the framework for that for me? Well, I'm a man of God. I'm a man of faith. Okay. I'm a man of faith. All right. I have a testimony.
Sure.
I'm a Christ follower. Okay. So I think for me, that's extremely important. Okay. And the reason I think that piece is important is because, again, our profession is under siege. Okay. Our profession is under siege at a high level. Okay. And I think we have to have coaches out there that are willing every single day, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do character-wise, to defend our profession, because it is, in fact, to me, a good profession. Okay. There are a lot of negative aspects of it, no doubt. But at the end of the day, most of us can say that when we go to work and we come home, we're fulfilled. So we enjoy what we do. So I think it's a good, it's a good practice to have good character. Okay. Reflecting those things that are noble and true
Amen.
and just,
Absolutely.
right? All those things. Okay. All those things. And I get that from Philippians 4, verse 8 through 9. Okay. I think the last thing, in this trifecta is, and I got to say this right, okay, because this is something that I've been thinking about. You got to commit to the watering of the bamboo philosophy, okay? The watering of the bamboo philosophy. So I don't know if any of you young coaches have heard about that. If you have, then you know what I'm talking about. But essentially, if you are growing bamboo, you know that bamboos don't grow very quickly, very fast. Sometimes it may take years. But if you keep watering, you keep tending to it and keep cultivating, then eventually at some point down the road, that inch seed or that inch bamboo that you planted is probably going to grow to be 10 foot tall. So what is the meaning behind that? The meaning behind that to me is that you can't be obsessed with immediate gratification. You can't be in this profession. See, it's just like what I said earlier. I didn't go to school to be a coach. Many of you probably didn't go to school to be a coach. So there really is no playbook that you can go to a college and get and say, okay, this is what it takes to be a really good coach. You have to get in it and you have to observe, learn, and grow.
Right.
And the other thing is this, okay? And I want to make this point very, very clear. Coaching falls under the structure of education. When you look at a profession, we are in education, men. And if you look at education, we're considered teachers. Philosophically, we're teachers. Jim Boeheim said that. He said, we're teachers. We may make more than the average teacher, which is great. That's a blessing, but we're teachers. But in the teaching profession, if you're good at what you do, typically you're going to stay in a position for a very long time. Okay? You are. Yep. So when you come in as a young coach, you can't be obsessed with thinking it's only going to take me 2 or 3 years to get to this level and I'm going to be good. It's much longer than that. So all I'm saying is, it's great to have goals and expectations, and it's great to work for that, but don't be obsessed with immediate gratification. And the last thing I'll say, this is part 2 of 3, okay? Comparison is the enemy of your calling. Comparison is the enemy of your calling. So if you're comparing your lot, your future, your desires, your dreams with somebody else's, then you know what? I think you're doing yourself a disservice, okay? Stay focused. Okay, work your craft, okay? Appreciate where you are. And if you do things the right way, eventually you're going to get there. I'm just telling you, you're going to get there. I'm living proof you're going to get there. You're going to get there. And some of you are already there. That's all I got for that, B.
No, that's that's big time right there. That's big time. I mean, all those things are things I think that when you're getting into this business and starting off your career and early in your career or any point, the character part so important, comparison so important, all of those things you spoke on, Coach. That's a lot of powerful nuggets there. Appreciate you sharing that for sure.
Oh, you got it,
your living testimony that I'm sure you probably didn't necessarily think. I'm sure you probably didn't think you were going to be at UCLA and TCU back when you started at Bradley, but testament to you following those things.
Thank you.
Thank you. What would you say are some of your favorite lessons so far in your career that this career has taught you? What's a couple or however many you want, just some of your favorite lessons that you've learned in your career?
Well,
again, over 25 years, having several NBA players, having 10, you've had.
Yeah, I think, and I don't mean to oversimplify this, but I do think relationships are extremely important, and not just with the player, but I think with your administrative staff, I think with your trainer, I think with your academic person. I think those are internal relationships that you have to maintain at a high level at any institution that you work at. Simply because you just don't know where these folks are going to be, right? You just don't know. And
Right.
and I also think too that because our overall goal is the success of the student athlete, we all have a part in that, and we all share in that. So I think that's extremely important. And I think also on the outside, externally, I think having powerful relationships with people in our business, whether it's an AAU coach, a high school coach, whatever the case is, because we are in the business of connecting dots. Okay, we connect dots, and the dots are information, and information is currency in our business. Okay,
Yep.
knowing what's going on in a particular recruiting situation is important, but the only reason why you get that information is because you've cultivated a relationship with either an AAU coach or a high school coach. Okay, and I think that's extremely important, and don't forget that. Don't. I'm just telling you. I don't want to oversimplify it, but relationships are extremely important. Okay, I think the other thing is that if you're trying to become something, okay, because you're observing somebody that you admire or somebody you want to be like, I think a better way to say that is follow people that you're not. Follow people that you're not. Okay, learn from people that's not a part of who you are. Grow in those areas. I think that's extremely important. Okay, follow people you're not. All right. I think also too, and this is along the lines of being an assistant coach, you got to be a problem solver. You got to be a problem solver. Okay.
Yep.
There are many times that as assistant coaches, we are confronted with information and situations and scenarios that we just can't bring to our head coach. Okay. We can't do that because if we brought every problem to our head coach, then he probably would think we're not competent. Right. Probably think we're not competent. So be a problem solver, and being a problem solver is simply studying those areas that you've anticipated might come up that you might need to give answers to. Okay. Be an expert with the rules. You got to know the NCAA rules. You got to know APR. You got to know that because the head coach has got all these things he's trying to juggle. Okay. He's trying to put together a team. He's trying to fundraise. He's trying to politic. He's working in a whole different sphere than we are. Okay. The bottom line, coaches, is that oftentimes we're the runs, assistants. We are the ones that are running the program. So be a problem solver. Okay. I think the last thing is that you have to know your nose, knowing your nose. So in other words, no settling. Okay. I try not to settle for anything less than excellence. Okay. I think no compromise. Okay. Guys, you will be faced with compromise. Trust me. I can tell you, 25, 26 years in the business, you will be faced with compromise. Okay. The question is, are you going to succumb to it, or are you going to do the right thing? Okay. And I'm going to tell you, if you can, avoid compromising at all costs. Okay. Because your reputation is on the line, and the reputation is all we got, fellas. It's all we got. Okay. No procrastination is a huge thing for me. Okay. For others, it may be different, but I don't procrastinate. I try to knock out what I have to knock out, because when you procrastinate, it creates stress. Our business already has stress. Okay. It already has stress. Okay. And then don't burn bridges. Don't burn bridges. Don't do that. Okay. Treat people the right way. Treat people how you want to be treated. Whether it's people within your administration, your staff, your players, or AAU coaches, or high school coaches, or whatever. Don't burn bridges. Please don't do that. And the last thing I'll tell you about that, B, is you have to chronologue. You have to create a history. You have to have a book of things that you write down, okay? Because it creates a roadmap. Reflection is a powerful thing that I think is way understated. Reflection is a powerful thing because in our profession, and I've noticed this, so often you could, I've made the mistake of doing this, and that's why I'm saying it. At 15 years in the business, okay, at 15 years in the business, there was probably a point where I stopped growing. I stopped growing, because I kind of thought I had arrived. All right. And when I say I stopped growing, I mean, I didn't go to seminars, I didn't go to workshops, and didn't watch a lot of film, okay? And didn't keep up with current trends. And that went on for 3 years. Well, I can tell you that 3 years probably cost me 6. It probably cost me 6, okay? That's a huge mistake. I'm telling you guys, don't make the same mistake that I made. Don't make, chronologue, take notes, ask questions, okay? Know your history, know where you want to go.
That's
Coach,
powerful.
sorry, Coach, can I ask a question on that real quick?
Yeah.
So I believe very heavily in what you just said, and I think it's a great recommendation. Do you have any?
So real quick, just tell us your name and where you're
I'm
from.
sorry, I apologize.
No
So
problem.
I'm Alex Fernandez. I'm from Fleming College. I'm the head coach. I'm located in Toronto, Ontario, up here in Canada. Sorry for not introducing myself. And again, thank you for taking your time to do this. With the reflection piece, what, if any, methods are you currently employing? And like, what could you suggest to somebody who's not good at writing everything down, so to speak, or hasn't traditionally been good at writing things down? How do you organize your thoughts? How do you make time to go back, etc.?
Very good question. Very good question. Okay, so here's what I do, okay? This may or may not work for you, okay? If you don't like taking the pen and the pad, use your phone, okay? Use your phone, okay? Text yourself. I do that all the time. Go to the note section on your phone and write that down. Immediately when you see something or hear something, write it down, okay? Write it down. That's extremely important, okay? That's part one of this. Part two is what I like to do is I listen, like I mentioned, I listen to TED Talks. I go to YouTube. I subscribe to a young man named Jordan Sperber, who you probably already know, who's phenomenal. And I sit, and during this pandemic and during this shelter in place, every single day, I'm writing things down, okay? And there is no particular order. There is no particular order, but what I've done is that after 2 or 3 days, I go back and I review my notes, and it takes a lot of discipline. I review my notes and I organize them in a fashion in my notebook. And you can see it. Here's my notebook right here. I have a notebook, and I have grid paper in my notebook because I love to write on grid paper. That's what I do. And I organize it in a way that I can understand it, and I date it, okay? And in my office at TCU, I have volumes of notebooks, and I may never go back. But it's there, and that's what I do. That's what I do. I think the reflection piece is huge because if you don't learn from the past, you will continue to repeat it. I know that's a very simple statement. It's a common statement, but it's true, okay? You have to continue to grow, and you have to continue to progress. So again, use your phone. Seriously, use your phone, okay? If you don't want to type it, use the voice memo. I do that all the time. Use the voice memo and record what you're thinking, okay? Those are just some ideas that have worked for me.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Great question. Sorry about that. Coach, you mentioned reputation within some of the lessons you've learned. And just real quick, if you can touch on just what do you think it is? I mean, you've been in this business almost 3 decades. What do you think it is that allows you, or has allowed you, or would you attribute to what's allowed you to have such a great reputation amongst other people?
Well, just like all the stuff that I've been talking about, I think you have to, you do have to build some boundaries. And I hate using that word, but you do, in my opinion, have to build some boundaries. There's just things that you're just not gonna tolerate. Okay, like for instance, guys, I'll just tell you, early on in my career, it might have been enticing for me to, after a AAU event, to maybe go hang out, right? Go hang out at a restaurant or a bar, and then 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock becomes 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And then the next thing you know, you got to get up and go to work again at a gym, and you're not sharp, and I fell victim to that a couple times in my career. And it cost me, okay? It cost me because once people think that you're not serious about your profession, then I think you got some real issues, you know. And in particular, I'll say this because I think it needs to be said. You know, I think in particular for minority coaches too. I think we have to be careful because of the people that we represent and the people that we want to coach. I think we have to set good examples, and there's some pressure there, but I think you got to really watch how you conduct yourself, you know. And I think you have to be going back. You have to be competent at what you do, and I think competence from afar is oftentimes, when I say afar, when people see what you're doing, they may not see exactly what you're doing, but they may see what the program is doing. Mm-hmm. Okay. They may see what the program is doing. Okay. I think that's extremely important. If a program that you're a part of is having success, something is going on, and it's sustainable success. Something is going on there. And if you've been there for a while, then chances are, I think your reputation will be attributed to that. It'll be attributed to that. I think in recruiting, I think no matter who you're recruiting or who you're recruiting against, making sure that you're saying things that are uplifting and correct and not demeaning to other schools and other coaches, I think that's extremely important too. There shouldn't be any bashing. We're all trying to do our jobs, and I know sometimes the competitive nature comes out and we're always trying to find advantages. But at the end of the day, I think parents and coaches, they don't want to hear you talk in a negative way about somebody else. Okay. And so I would caution you in that area. Okay. Because at some point a parent or a coach is going to be talking to another coach, and they're going to say, you know what, this guy, this is all he does. He's just a negative person. He's saying all kinds of negative things about people. And if your name is mentioned, then, you know, in our profession, fellas, gossip spreads like wildfire. Okay. So, you know, those are just some practical things. I wish that I can articulate it better. I wish that there was like a 4 or 5 step plan that I can give to you, but that's how I think I've been able to avoid, you know, long-term damage to my reputation.
No, I think that was a great insight and definitely a great formula. Whether it's a 4 or 5 or however many steps, that was a real steps. So we appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
So kind of going in the same subject, Coach, of reputation and kind of the perception, you know, everybody most people in the profession have a desire to sit in the seat you sit in as a high major assistant, because in order to become a head coach, many times you have to be a high major assistant first. That's a lot of the formula. So in saying that, what's one aspect of being a high major assistant coach that's harder than what maybe it looks like it is? Because guys like you make it look easy. And then what's another aspect of it on the flip side that may not be as difficult as it seems?
Well, I'll say this, fellas. I mean, there's probably not one aspect of my job that isn't challenging, that doesn't require thought each and every day of how to approach. I'll give you a story. You know, when I was working at UCLA and understanding the expectation there and the tradition and the pressure that would come along with that, this is truth that I'm telling you right now. Every single day that I would drive to work and park my car, before I parked my car, I had to take a deep breath. Okay. And I prayed, you know, Lord, just basically give me the strength, because jobs at the high major level in particular demand so much of you. There's so much going on every single day. Every single day there's so much going on. And it was crystallized at a high level at UCLA, okay? And so every day I still follow the same practice, okay? We have different challenges here at TCU, but the goal is still the same. The goal is each day that I go to work, I'm going to be confronted with something that I may not be prepared for unless I ask for strength, okay, unless I am prepared, okay? And so I would think that would be a strategy, okay? You know, just being prepared every single day for anything that comes your way, all right? And also know, too, that that very little of your day is probably going to be spent on the court. Okay, maybe 25% of your day is going to be spent on the court. All the other 75% of the time is maybe checking class or dealing with the academic advisor or interfacing with marketing or dealing with a recruiting issue, whatever the case is. Okay, so that piece you just have to be ready for. Okay, and along with that, I think you got to maintain your health. You do. You always have to maintain your health because you're under enormous amounts of stress. And that's okay. That's just part of the business. Some of the stress is good, right? Some of the stress is adrenaline that you're utilizing to have a good practice or to have a good game, So I think that those areas are things that you want to take note of, okay? Now, I will say this on the flip side, things that might appear to be hard, but in essence, for me, they haven't really been that hard. And I'm going to say this, and this is just me, being in the business for 25, 26 years, some of you may have been told that it's hard to have a family, okay? I will tell you that, yeah, there may be some challenges, but it's not as difficult as you think. It's not, and I'll explain, okay? You just have to be intentional about it, okay? You have to be intentional. And so for me, family is extremely important, okay? And I made sure that wherever I was working, that there was going to be a balance, okay? I made sure that my wife and my children would be able to come and see me at work. And if I needed to get off of work to go to an event, as long as it didn't conflict with the game or anything that was extremely important, that I was going to be able to do that, okay? So I'll tell you that you, in fact, can have a family. So young coaches who are on this call, don't think that you can't. You just have to be intentional about it. You got to be very organized about it, okay? I think that's extremely important, okay? I think the other thing, B, can you hear me still?
Yep.
B, can you hear me? Hold on for a second. I got to do something real quick.
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but if you get a chance, put your name and info in the chat as well. That way everybody can kind of know who's who and stay in touch. A good opportunity to network as well.
Hey, Brian, thanks for taking the time to organize this. I found it very useful. Thank you. Yeah,
glad to do it, man. We'll be doing it every week as best we can, bringing different people and having a chance to just share. And we'll give some time at the end too, where you can ask questions to Coach, just kind of like you did. So we'll have some conversation at the end. I think Coach got disconnected.
Yeah, you there? Are you there? Can you hear me?
For a second, I think he's coming back. Okay, yep, there you are, Coach.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yep. No problem.
But the other thing I'll tell you that requires some intention and some discipline is the social media piece. Okay, yeah, some of us may think it's hard to get away from that, but it's really not. And that's just for me. I've learned, 4, 5, 6 years ago that what creates a lot of stress oftentimes is looking at the opinions of others, okay, and seeing what everybody else is doing, okay. I think there's a time and a place for that, but when you're focused on your job and trying to do the very best you can possibly do, I think social media or reducing your social media use is extremely important, because we can pick our phones up all the time, and I just mentioned to the coach in Toronto, using your phone to take notes, okay. Well, I think that's a useful way to use your phone. What I'm talking about is just simply, every 5-10 minutes, your phone dings and you're looking at Twitter, or you're looking at Instagram, or whatever the case may be. I would tell you to try to reduce that. Okay, and that's worked for me. So that's just a nugget, I guess.
No, that's good. And to follow up on just that thing, there's some differences between now and when you started this profession, again, being this profession almost 3 decades. what would you say? You talked about adaptability with Coach Dixon. So I guess the same thing would be true to yourself. You've been adaptable over these 3 decades. Social media may be a part, there may be others, but what would you say has allowed you to be so adaptable and successful over the span of decade after decade as this profession has changed?
Well, and I think being able to adapt to me is a key factor. I also think establishing values, okay? Values that feed into a character. You got to have values, okay? Because I think certain values probably don't change regardless of generation or regardless of time period. You know, honesty, okay? Hard work, giving effort, you know, all those things, for me, I think it's allowed me to move in and out of these decades, okay? I think one of the challenges, though, has been when you look at recruiting in particular. When I first started recruiting, 1993, 94, there just weren't as many people involved in the recruiting process as it is today. And I think it's at every level. There's just so many people involved, okay? From the high school coach to the mom, the dad, the uncle, the cousin. There's just so many people involved, okay? And I think because of that, I think I've had to stress with myself internally the need to be even more consistent, to have a more consistent message. You know, I can't tell the high school coach something different than I'm telling the mom. I can't tell the mom something different I'm telling the dad. You know, and that presents some challenges, okay? But being consistent to me is a value. That's a value, okay? So I think, you know, adapting, yes. Character-wise, you know, no compromise. And having those values that you can always attest to and turn to, you know. I think for the game itself, I mean, there was a point, Brian, and you probably studied just like the rest of the coaches, there was a point when the game was a lot more physical, right? It was a lot more physical, and it's not quite like that. The game was a little bit slower, and it's not quite like that. It's fast. And I think understanding the importance of analytics, right? I mean, I think that's an area in which I think I've been able to grow a little bit and has allowed me to remain somewhat relevant. And it's what I told you before. You know, I think we have to always be in the business of growing at the rate of change. I want to stress that you have to grow at the rate of change. There's never a moment when you can't grow because there's always something new out there. It's just how you want to apply it.
Right.
How you want to apply it.
It's good. It's great stuff, Coach. Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Great stuff. So we'll shift this last little section to vision, impact, and legacy type questions. Give you 5 of these. So what would you say is the why for you in coaching, and how do you balance? You talked about family. I know you have a son and a daughter, a son that plays football at UTEP. And so how do you balance impacting your family at home with impacting your team as well?
Well, let me just say the why, you know, the why in terms of why am I coaching? Why am I in this profession? And remember, this is not something that I initially desired, but when I got into it, everything who I was sort of matched the profession and the environment that I was in. So I have discovered, or this was something that was a revelation to me, that my why is because there's a greater pursuit of service that has been embedded in me. There's a greater pursuit of service, okay? And then I think there's also a greater capacity to give back, okay? My grandmother on my mother's side was an educator. My mother was an educator, okay? And in particular, my aunts and some of my uncles are all educators, all right? And so naturally, this is what I've been around, but I'm just doing it sort of in a different vein. You know, I'm doing it through athletics, okay? So that is my why. That's why I do it, okay? I do it because of the service that's involved, okay, and the capacity to give back. You know, there are many people throughout my lifetime, throughout your lifetime, throughout throughout all of our lifetimes that invested great time into who we are as people. Okay. And right now, sure, I can't do anything but give that back. Okay. But give that back. All right. That was the vision that was implanted in me. So as it relates to family, okay, yeah, there has to be a work-family balance, okay? And our teams, our players, the staffs that we're on, that's a family, okay? So how does all that work, all right? So I mentioned earlier about being intentional. So I'm just going to tell you how I did it, okay? Here's how I did it. No matter where I worked, when I was at Bradley, when I was at New Mexico, when I was in Los Angeles, and now at TCU, the one thing that I tried to do is I tried to make sure that I was in close proximity. Where I lived was in close proximity to campus. That's a practical thing, okay? That I'm 15, 20 minutes away so that, again, my wife could come and see me and my kids can come see me, or if I had to go get my kids from someplace, I could do that, all right? Now, some of you might be saying, well, shoot, Duane, you were in Los Angeles. How in the world did you do that, okay? Because no matter where you are in Los Angeles, there's a lot of traffic. Well, I'll tell you, it cost me money. It was expensive, but the time invested in my family was much more valuable than what I was paying in rent and gas and time in traffic, okay? So that's an intentional thing, okay? I made sure that my family was close to me, okay? My son in particular, okay? We all have children, and it just worked out for me that my son, who's a collegiate football player, didn't play basketball. He didn't play basketball, okay? He played football. So it was an alternative or opposite season, all right? We didn't intentionally do that. It just worked out that way. So to me, that's a God thing. But I'm just telling you, fathers out there and future fathers, you have to keep that in mind, okay? Because if family's important to you and your kids are playing in sports, you want to be a part of that. I'm just telling you, you want to be a part of that because there's moments in those games and those practices that you're not going to be able to get back, okay? And I'm telling you, to see your child or children succeed in those areas, it's magical, okay? So I'm telling you, that's extremely important. That was important to me. So I made sure that I was at the majority of my son's games, okay? I think the other thing is that, you know, I talked earlier about adaptability and flexibility, and I gave you my definition for both. I think working for a coach who's flexible in the area of allowing you to go places, or he tolerates it, or he's okay with it, is also important. Now, some of us may not have a choice about who we work for, or when you end up working from somebody, maybe it doesn't work out the way you want to. But that's something that I made sure was a standing principle in my life, in particular when I got married, that I was working for somebody who understood my need to be a family man, okay? I understood that was important to me and it was important to my wife, okay? Right. Now, the other thing, and this is the last thing, okay? And this is purely Duane talking, okay? I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, fellas. I'm just giving you my story, okay? I made some sacrifices, okay? I sacrificed advancement and probably more security for stability, okay? So in other words, I didn't move a lot. If you look at my track record, I was a coach at Bradley for 9 years, okay? I was a student athlete for 4, okay? So I'm in Central Illinois for 13, 14 years, okay? I went to New Mexico and I was there with 2 coaches. And from the first coach to the second coach, the first coach was Richie McKay, who's now the head coach at Liberty. The second coach is Steve Alford, who's now the head coach in Nevada, who I also work with at UCLA. Both coaches, that time span was probably about 11 years, okay? It was 11 years, okay? And then I went to UCLA. I was at UCLA for 6.5, almost 7 years, okay? And now I'm at TCU, all right? Now, why am I telling you all this? Because at each one of those stops, other than UCLA, at Bradley and at New Mexico, I had a chance at the time to leave and go to a higher level, but I chose not to. And the reason I chose not to is because, again, I sacrificed advancement and more security because it was going to be more money and it was probably going to get me closer to the goal of being a head coach. I sacrificed those things for stability. And I would not trade anything. Any decision that I made regarding my family and my work and the balance between the two, I would not trade it. I would not trade it. Okay. So that's how I would answer that question, Brian. I hope that made sense.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great stuff. There's definitely sometimes a perception that you can't do both, Coach. So we definitely appreciate you sharing, even at the highest level as possible. Definitely appreciate that. What do you think are the biggest, or what do you feel like are the biggest challenges in impacting young people? And where do you think you have had the most success in your impact of young people?
Well, you know, and I think I mentioned this before, but I think now it's the deficit of trust that exists, just the deficit of trust. You know, I think it's harder nowadays because there's so many competing values. Okay. And you're competing for that mind space. You're competing for that heart space. You know, you almost have to become a real estate agent because you're trying to get new property in the kid's mind and heart. That's what you're trying to do. But it's hard. It's extremely hard because you got all these voices, you got all these people, you got social media. Okay. So again, you know, making sure that your message is direct and truthful, yet having a sympathetic ear to listen. That's called courageous communication. You have to be able to engage in courageous communication, being direct and being truthful, okay, but having a sympathetic listening ear, okay? I think that's extremely important, all right? I think body language has become a huge topic in coaching because I think kids are less sophisticated in how they communicate verbally and how they express themselves. Okay, so I think understanding body language and being able to govern body language in a way that benefits the group and is positive presents some challenges. It presents a lot of challenges, okay? And I think, you know, as a coach, you have to figure out how you're going to reward or how you're going to punish that, okay? Because it's an issue. You know, you say something to a coach or you say something to a player and you see him acting crazy and the body language is all bad, you know, I mean, it has a tendency to impact your culture, okay? And when your culture is impacted, you know, it spreads like a virus. So you got to be real careful with that. So I think that's a challenge, okay? I think, you know, we talked about the deficit of trust, but I think value and truth. You and I'm gonna stress this. You have to tell the truth to kids, you know, and I know sometimes it hurts, but kids have to know, all right? And if it does hurt the kid, then you just got to continue to work on your relationship, okay? You got to continue to work on your relationship. And I think at the end of the day, if you have the support of those around the young man, whether it's mother and father, high school coach, AAU coach, making sure that you keep everybody in the loop, then I think you have a better chance of success in reaching that young man, okay? The purpose for us being in this profession is not only to make really good basketball players, but to make citizens that can represent themselves in a manner that is exemplary, okay? That's what we're trying to turn out as products of our program, okay? And again, it's something that happens every single day. And that's what I try to do. You know? And I think too, keeping up with current trends in social behavior, okay, interpersonal communication. I think all those areas are important. What happens oftentimes in coaching is that we work on the X's and O's, okay, but we don't necessarily understand leadership principles or even having a framework to make leadership decisions, okay? Understanding the difference between how do you lead or guide someone who is less mature but really skilled, okay? Somebody who's really skilled but unwilling. I mean, these are all dynamics that need to be studied and need to be improved on because it helps you to become a much more effective communicator, okay? You have to become a communicator. And that communication is a very important piece in all this. And so I think there has to be constant training in those areas, not just X's and O's, okay? Because again, what are you competing for? You're competing for the hearts and minds of these young people.
That's powerful. That's good, Coach. There's so much trust. I love the real estate idea. You're competing for that real estate. Definitely having the circle around him is so important. I think you've obviously done such a great job in your career, but for all of us can continue to grow at that, because the people that they trusted before they got there are the people they're still going to trust while they're there with you. So the better relationship you have with those people that they trust, then you can help navigate some of the waters when you do have to tell them some truth that they don't want to hear, because there's so much to be said about that truth. So great stuff, Coach. Love that you shared that. So kind of project into the future. Just roll with me on.
Yep.
So as a future head coach, and I'm saying it's not you, but as a future head coach, how would you address, or what would be your philosophy in recruiting and retaining student athletes in this transfer day and age now?
Yeah, you're asking the question that the chancellor or the president will ask me, hopefully in a couple of years. But here's what I will tell you about that, B.
Getting you ready, baby. Getting you ready.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to keep that really, really simple. Okay. I think there's two things in particular. All right. When it comes to recruiting, you have to clarify what type of player you want to recruit based on the style you want to play. So you have to clarify. Okay. You have to clarify that. Okay. That's an exercise that either you're going to go through by yourself, or hopefully if you have a staff in place before you actually go out and recruit. Now, you have to also deal with the players you already have on campus, when you become a head coach. But as you're building your program, you have to clarify what type of player you're going to recruit, okay, and what's acceptable in terms of character and what's not, okay? Then I think the second thing is you have to then go out and find people, okay? When I say find people, find a staff that embodies what you want out of your players, okay? Some of those values that exist, you have to, because that to me is called alignment, okay? That's alignment. You got to have alignment from top to bottom, okay? My recruiting philosophy will be simple. It'd be simple. It'd be the ABCs, okay? Real simple. Athletic ability, okay? The level of basketball talent you need to win in a particular league, okay? And the character, ABCs. That's what it would be, okay? And in that, obviously, there would be a lot more detail, but on the surface, when our coaches are out looking, we're looking for athletic ability, we're looking for basketball talent, and basketball talent that is typically measured in my evaluation by the top 3 teams in your league. Whatever 3 teams in your league perform at a high level, what are their players like? What are they doing? Okay, and we have to get players that we can either develop to get to that point, okay, or players, if we get lucky through the transfer market or whatnot, that can come in and help right away, okay? And we got to have character, because I think character sustains culture, okay? So the ABCs, okay? Athletic ability, basketball talent, and character, okay? Now this issue with retention and inclusion, okay? Retention and inclusion, okay? I think, again, it all goes back to this, okay? And there's been debates about this, and I've read about this recently. The analytics of trying to predict which recruits are going to be better, okay? Which recruits will help your system, okay? There's all kinds of numbers out there, right? But at the end of the day, okay, I think numbers are important, B, but the eyes that I've used, and my heart that I've used for over 25 years probably can tell me more than numbers, okay? So what am I saying to you? You have to be able to evaluate. You got to be able to evaluate, okay? I think part of the problems why you have so many transfers is because of broken promises and misevaluations. Okay, so the broken promises might speak to a character flaw in your staff. Maybe that person was told something and it wasn't delivered, whatever it may be, okay? But I also think it's misevaluation. Maybe that player, for whatever reason, was selected in the recruiting process to come into your team because he could help you and it didn't work out. So I think we have to, as coaches, be better at how we evaluate at the college level, okay? Because when you evaluate, and you can't always get it right because it's not an exact science, but when you evaluate properly, and when you evaluate, you probably have to do it, if you can, in multiple environments, whether it's AAU, a practice, a game, a playoff game, wherever, because you have to understand the emotional stability and the player's ability to handle pressure in the most crucial moments, because when they get to college, they're going to be dealing with so much, okay? Why is all that important? Because the quicker that player comes to your campus and the quicker he gets integrated into your system, the more success, the more long-term success, and this is what the numbers prove, long-term success that recruit or that player will have. And to me, that's how you get cohesion. That's how you get cohesion, okay? And I think the underpinnings of that, to me, is values. What do you value and what do you want in your program? That's the underpinning of that, okay? Now, in this fast-paced, highly energized, warp speed profession that we're in, you can't always get it perfect, okay? But that's why I think you have to spend time in reflection, okay? And you have to understand where you want your program to go, all right? And again, I'm not saying that's a safeguard to the transfer portal, but I know the programs that I've been a part of at some point within my tenure there, or our tenure there, we've had a high level of success because, one, we've recruited, in particular at UCLA, we recruited the best student athletes, but even the best student athletes with the most talent still have to fit inside of a system, okay? And the evaluation was extremely important. At New Mexico, we had a ton of success, and we had a ton of success because we were able to identify young men who were willing to come in and work, fit inside of a system, and get better, okay, and get older, and value the same things that our philosophy valued. The same thing at Bradley, and it is the same thing at TCU. I haven't been here but a year, but Jamie Dixon has had more success at TCU than any other coach that's been here, okay, in recent histories. That's what the numbers prove. So anyway, that's how I would answer that.
No, good. And following up on great answer, Coach. Following up on Jamie Dixon, you've worked for a lot of elite head coaches. You mentioned Richard McKay. You've mentioned Steve Alford. You've mentioned the coach that hired you when you came out, Coach Bellary at Oklahoma. You've mentioned Jamie Dixon. What is one thing when you are blessed to become a head coach that you will take from each one of those guys and their strengths?
So I like that question. It's a good question, B. Jim Molinari, who I worked for at Bradley, I think, he was a very good, he's an excellent defensive-minded coach, okay? And so from an X and O point of view, I think the principles of how to effectively build a defense as well as how to adjust your defense, I think that's huge. But more importantly than that, the word that I used earlier, courageous communication, that's where I got that from. That's a word, or that's a phrase that I learned from him, because I remember vividly him saying to me, hey, listen, in basketball, there's going to be some conflict, right? You can't grow unless you have conflict, all right? But you don't have to be damaging. Conflict doesn't have to be damaging. It just has to be delivered in a way that creates that growth. So courageous communication to me is something that I take from him. And again, it's being direct and being truthful, but having a sympathetic ear. Okay, having a sympathetic ear. Okay, that's what I would take from Jim. And Jim was also the coach that led me to Christ. That's and the Christ component in my life has ultimately helped my character. And so I'm very thankful for that. I think with Richie McKay, Richie was very good at preparation for games and making adjustments in game, and was a very quick thinker on his feet. And so he taught me how to do that. And part of that is the prep that goes into any team that you're playing, okay? Knowing everything there is to know, but being concise enough to be able to make in-game changes and adjustments, okay? And I thank Richie for that, and Richie's still like that. I think with Steve Alford, what I would take from him is from top to bottom, understanding that there is a blueprint of how to run a program from top to bottom, a blueprint. And with that blueprint, and I think that the major goal behind that blueprint is so that you can be organized enough and intentional enough to have the work-family balance, okay? I really learned the work-family balance with him, okay? And that's that's been rewarding and enriching in my life. Okay. And with Jamie Dixon, you know, I think what I've been able to study and observe this year is his ability to build long-term, sustainable, successful programs. Okay, that's what I'm taking from him. And again, all those qualities we talked about: adaptability, okay, extreme energy, okay, keeping what is most important in a program most important, the student athlete. Okay, so now you know you have a full spectrum approach on what success might look for, because all those coaches I named have had a high level of success, have coached in NCAA tournaments, and recruited and developed players that have gone on to the next level. And so I'm very thankful. I'm very, very thankful that I've been able to work for such esteemed men.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Terrific answer, Coach. Last real question. I got one bonus question and one fun bonus question from somebody in the room. So the last question is, what do you look for yourself to be your legacy that you leave behind when your career is all said and done?
I want to be known as an infinite giver. An infinite giver, okay? No matter what the circumstance, situation, environment. When someone thinks about Duane Broussard, I'm not so sure I want to be thought of in the context of being some phenomenal X and O coach that won many championships or whatever. I mean, all that's good. Recruited really good players. All that's good. But I think what's most important to me is to be recognized as a person that was just a giver. You know, just gave whatever I could, whether it was time, whether it was energy, whether it was effort, and gave it selflessly. Just give. That's what I want to be known for. Okay. And to do that, in order to be that way, again, you have to have an enormous energy source. And the energy source that I have is what I told you earlier, a tremendous amount of love for this profession. Okay. A tremendous amount of love for the people that are in this profession and I serve. So that's what I want to be known for. Can you hear me, B?
Great answer, Coach. Great.
Yep. Yeah.
No, yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. That's
okay. Yeah. Okay.
I think there's a reason why you've benefited so much in your career and been blessed, because you've been such a infinite giver already to this point, and why your reputation is so positive, and why you've been continuously, again, that reputation and just being able to be associated with other great coaches and to be able to have such stability at each place you've been at is a testament to that giving. So salute to you on that, Coach. Great answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bonus question. What's one life lesson you learned from the game of basketball when you played that you still use today that you can leave with us? Question, I'll give them both to you at once, from someone in the room, is who is the top 3 point guards at your high school? Willow Ridge, is that correct?
Yeah, Willow Ridge. Yeah. Well, let me see. I'll answer the life lesson. The life lesson that I take from basketball is and I still try to apply this today, that no matter what's going on, no matter what the situation and circumstances, I think it's going to get better. I think it's going to get better, and it's going to get better even if there's failure involved. It's going to get better because you're going to learn so much from it, so that if you do fail, you won't fail the next time. Okay. And I think that's what athletics teach you. You know, when you think about basketball in particular, basketball is so different than other sports. Like, for instance, in football, I consider football to be what I would call a sequential sport. So you have players on both sides of the ball, okay? The only time players on both sides of the ball play the game simultaneously is when there's an interception or a fumble. Otherwise, when the offense is done, the defense comes on. Basketball is what I would call an interdependence sport, okay? That means you play both sides of the sport or the game simultaneously, okay? So why is that important? Because in life, you have to have the flexibility and the ability to adapt, in knowing that runs will happen. And if you're down 5, guess what? You might go up 5 the next 2 minutes. It changes just like that if you just keep working and you keep and you keep doing the right things, eventually it's going to work out. It's going to work out. That to me is the lesson that I've learned. It's going to work out. Okay. And that positivity, I think, has allowed me to enjoy the successes in this profession that I've been able to. You know, I'll add this. I mean, seriously, and before I answer the question about the point guards, I feel compelled to tell you that, you know, a couple years ago, and I'm sure everybody knew this because it was a world story, you know, I was in a jail cell in China. I was in a jail cell with 3 of our players at UCLA because of something that they did in a marketplace. And while I was in jail, you know, you think about it, when you were a kid, not knowing that things are going to be okay and knowing what the future is going to be, and being in a foreign country, how afraid you might be because of that. But that was a magical moment for me because I had the golden opportunity to be behind bars, basically, in a cell with our players, encouraging them and telling them, hey, it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. Even when I at times didn't believe it. Okay, I didn't believe it. But what drove me to do that is the love that I have for those young men. Okay. And I've had other experiences where I didn't know if it was going to work out, but in the end it did. Okay. So I'm just telling you, coaches, okay, stick with what you're doing. If you believe in it, it's going to work. Trust me, it is going to work if you believe in it. The other question about the point guards. Now, you want to know who the 3 best point guards were? At Willow Ridge? Well, I can tell you right now, I was not one of them. I was not one of them, okay? But I would say T.J. Ford. T.J. Ford came, I think he was 5 years behind me. So I often say that he didn't go to my high school. I went to his high school. So T.J. Ford was one. I think Henry Golightly, who was a player before me, but didn't get a whole lot of recognition because at that time in the mid-'80s, AAU ball just wasn't as big in Texas, as you know. It just wasn't as big. But he was really, really good. And then I think the other person that I would say is I think it's Paco Redman. I think that's his last name, Paco Redman, who actually played at Drexel. And T.J. Ford obviously played at Texas. And Paco was really, really good because he had such a tremendous feel of how to play. And he was taught and coached by my head coach, Gary Nichols. And, you know, Gary Nichols was a phenomenal player in high school and college and taught me a lot of things about the game of basketball. You know what? I mentioned Nelson Haggerty. Nelson Haggerty was the other one, too. I would say Nelson was really good, too. So that's 4. I probably gave you one more than you needed, but none of them included myself. So there you go. Good question.
Well, the 4th one is the person that asked the question. Actually, he's on the call, Nelson.
That's good. Yeah.
On the call, so I think you almost dropped the ball.
No.
You almost dropped the ball, man. But you came through.
Yeah. That's good, man.
Everything was phenomenal, man. You came.
Oh, man.
Good to see you, Nels. Good to see you, man.
Hey, man. This is incredible, bro. This is incredible, brother. You make us all proud, man, from back at home. Man, I just got through talking to Coach Nick, man, a couple hours ago.
Good.
Watching your career, man. It's funny. I never got a chance I didn't know you until after you were playing. But the legacy you left, man, at the Ridge was just incredible, man. So,
thank you,
man. Much congratulations to you, man. What you're doing,
you, brother.
Man. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Okay, right, we will. Thank you. Yep. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So we'll open it up now for just conversation questions. We got 15 minutes or so. We'll just try to end it with just hanging out with Coach and open up to the room. We thank you so much, Coach. I know you've been a tremendous light for me and a mentor and just an example of how to carry yourself, how to do things. And I've been blessed during this COVID-19 pandemic to get closer to you. So I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your wisdom and sharing your story because I think everybody got a ton from it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, B. Thank you.
So let's just open it up and unmute your phones and just have a little conversation before we break. Coach Hag, we'll let you go first since you guys already know each other. Let everybody else warm up.
And it's just, fellas, just so you know, it's full transparency here. You know, I don't think any question is really out of the box. I mean, not knowing all of you who are on this call, I still trust the fact that, you know, you respect the game enough and respect me that you would ask me something that, you know, is above board. So feel free. Whatever I have is yours. So.
Well, yeah, I finally got this thing back unmuted, but I mean, you've been at some different places, obviously. I just wonder, and I know you talked about, you know, definitely coming in with your strength and definitely leading with that, but what are some of the challenges that you face moving from different spots to different spots, and how maybe that you had to adapt, not just to the head coach, but to the different universities, man, that you've been at, and leagues, I guess, at that too?
Yeah, really good question. I think there's Nels, each stop that I've been able to execute, it's always been a step up. So from Bradley to New Mexico, from New Mexico to UCLA, from UCLA to TCU, and you might think, okay, from UCLA to TCU, is that really a step up? Yeah, in a sense it is, because the Pac-12 is just so different than the Big 12. Okay, yeah. It's just you're talking about. I mean, you played in the Big 12, so it's just a different league. But going from one school to another, to me, there's always a culture issue. Okay, you get hired. You know, if you're a new coach, you're hired because there might be a weakness somewhere in the culture, and you're there to fix it. And so, you know, from Bradley, I knew Bradley because I went to school there, and the coach I worked for coached me. When I went to New Mexico, I went there under Richie McKay, and Richie McKay coached me while I was a student athlete at Bradley. But we had a different level of student athlete there. You know, we had at the time, we had student athletes that were leaving. We had student athletes that felt like they were old or entitled for whatever reason. And we had to work through that. And that isn't always easy. And I have found the best medicine there is just to listen and to try to determine if it's more education a player might need, if it's more compassion a player might need, or if it's more motivation a player might need. You know, I think I think, and then trying to figure out between all three of those areas, which you need to use the most is always the trick. Okay. And fortunately for me, because I've always been with coaches who felt the same way and had good leadership ability, we've always been able to find the answers. Yeah. And so I think listening, I think understanding the player, I think also getting to know the parents of those situations, getting to know, again, high school coaches, AAU coaches, because we're all interconnected. Okay. I think also getting aligned with what the administration wants. I think that's extremely important. Okay. Yeah. And then I think too, whatever the results of anything that you're doing in your program, whatever you're asking players or whatever you're holding players accountable for, I think your intentions have to match. Okay. So on the court, if you're trying to be a great offensive rebounding team, but you don't work on that, then there's an inconsistency in your coaching. And I think that destroys your reputation and credibility, right. You know, because players are all about that. Okay. So I just think in order to hold players accountable, make sure you're teaching and giving those things to them. Okay. I think Jamie Dixon is the first coach that I've worked for that I didn't have a prior relationship with. So that adjustment initially for me was somewhat stressful because I've always been able to communicate with the head coaches that I've worked with because I've known them. Right. And I've known them at a high level. So it took me a little bit of time to understand how to communicate with Jamie and how to get my point across to him. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, with Coach Molinari at Bradley, because I was a player, we had a special relationship. And I was a player for him when he first came in as a coach. So I helped to build his program. So there was a huge amount of trust there. It was the same thing with Richie. You know, Richie knew me, so I felt like I could communicate with him on and off the floor. When I first started working for Steve, I didn't know Steve. Right. I knew of Steve, but I didn't know Steve. And what I discovered, though, is that we had very similar values and we wanted some of the same things. And because I had already been at New Mexico, he relied on me in areas that made me feel like I was more a part of the situation than maybe if I didn't know anything about New Mexico. Okay. But coming into an established culture, you know, at TCU, you know, coming into Jamie Dixon's 4th year as a head coach there, knowing that Ryan Miller, who I knew and respect well at New Mexico, was there, and then having Tony Benford, who has a ton of experience coming in, you know, we had to work through some things, not in a bad way, it was all good, but it just took a little bit of time. And now I think we're on the same page. So understanding there's going to be some stress, right? And there's going to be some questions, but I think you got to be in a position where you can observe and be patient. Be patient. And I think that's how I've been able to handle it, and how I've been able to, like I mentioned with recruiting, you know, how you try to integrate your players into your system. I think I've been able to integrate because I've listened and I've paid attention, and I've adapted. Yeah.
Good stuff,
Good
man.
question. Yeah. Thank you. Good question.
We'll try to take at least two more questions.
I hope no one's getting Zoom exhausted. You know,
I was stuck on mute. This is Adam Hood, UTSA.
Adam.
I just wanted to kind of touch on your experiences, and you're talking about your adaptability, and you've recruited across decades. You know, so I just want to know, like, basically what, like, obviously when you first started recruiting, you have a lot of experience, but what's something that you had naturally early on, say 25 years ago, that you still use today? And what are some of the things that have kind of adapted for you as you know, from the 90s you're recruiting and now to today's, you know, social media and all that good stuff?
Well, I think this is going to sound kind of strange, Adam, but when I first started recruiting, I had this thing about players that could handle the ball. Okay. Like really good ball handlers, no matter if they were 5'8" or, you know, 6'10", because I just think ball handling at the time was a very, very important skill. And it was something that I thought I was very good at. So I just naturally gravitated to those type of players. Okay. And then also too, the character component, because of who I worked for and who I played for, I think that was something that he had stressed. And then I think a fair amount of athletic ability. Okay. Because of how we played. We were at the time a pressure defense-oriented type of school or program. And so that's what I look for. And because I had played in that system, then I knew kind of what to recognize. And I had some really good role models in terms of coaches that had come before me that taught me those areas of evaluation. And back then, there were so many different opportunities, or so many more opportunities to recruit. I can remember being able to go to open gyms and being able to go to parks and being able to stay out in the summertime the whole summer. So I watched a ton of basketball, a ton of basketball. And I think it helped to strengthen my eye for talent. I think as I progressed, what I begin to do a lot is look at our league and, you know, like I mentioned before, look at some of the top teams in our league. At the time we were, but what were some of the qualities of players that made them successful? Okay. And this is no lie, Adam. What I started doing is I started trying to project, okay, what does our league in the Missouri Valley at the time, what do we have, or what don't we have that in recruiting, if we do have it, could be very special? Okay, so I started thinking about that. And honestly, you know, through NBA evaluations and talking to different people and trying to figure out the way the game was going, I discovered through information that the 6'10" skilled stretch four was something that was going to become very common in the game of basketball. Okay, but at the time it wasn't. Okay, so in the Missouri Valley, that's what led me to recruit a young man by the name of Danny Granger. because that's exactly what he was. He was a player that was of the future. You know, it was like reaching into the future and bringing somebody back. And he had all the character qualities that made him very successful. He was a great student. You know, he was a really good teammate, and he was extremely skilled. Okay. So that's what helped me during the middle years of my career as I was trying to get off, just trying to project, you know, looking at what would work, you know, in terms of what would be special in your league. What does your league not have that it would greatly benefit from if you can get it to recruiting, okay, if that makes sense. And then you kind of fast forward that, and you kind of see within that range of player, you know, that 6'8", the 6'7", you know, the 6'9" player that can handle the ball, shoot, and do all this, multi-skilled players. That's just so common now, you know. So I felt pretty good about being at the forefront of that revolution. And I think now, you know, with social media, I would say before I got to UCLA, I didn't really think that was that big of a deal, social media. And the reason why is because I just wasn't very good at it. But I know there is a use for it. I know that it's important because I think it's a medium in which kids use. So, you know, whether it's tweeting, Instagram, all that, I think is extremely important. And the younger generation, like yourself, Adam, you probably know more about it than I do. But I will say this. What I've had to get used to in the social media era is if I send a message and the kid responds back to me in 5 minutes and we have a dialogue, and then all of a sudden he doesn't call me back or text me back in 2 days, I just can't get offended, you know, because that happens. You know, I can't get offended. So what I find myself doing a lot is talking to parents and coaches to try to get my point across and then building that trust, because eventually kids still need to be able to talk to you on the phone and face-to-face. That's a part of who we are as people, and that's a part of our interaction with humans and how we grow and develop. So I've tried to go the social media route. I don't post a lot, but I'll reach out to kids and talk to them. And I have gotten some positive results over the years. But to me, I found that that's just not enough. You still need to be able to communicate and talk. So hopefully I answered the question.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I think Mike Lopez, you have a question, and then we'll wrap it up. But thank Coach for coming.
Yep.
Coach,
Yeah.
Mike Lopez, I'm with the Creative Coaching Podcast I hosted, and I really appreciate your time today. My question is based really around kind of the social unrest right now and how that affects our players, our staff members, not just the minority players that we coach, but also maybe even the white players we have and how they feel, you know, about that, the situation. How can we be better leaders through this? And like, you know, given that situation you were in China, mm-hmm. kind of seeing ourselves in that same situation right now and kind of taking them through that process.
Mike, here's what I would say to you first. I've been on calls with you before through Kevin Sutton, and I've seen you, and I appreciate you. Because you speak up, man. I appreciate that. Here's what I would tell you in that. My approach is this. You know, there's in my opinion, three positions of leadership. Okay, you can lead from the front, you can lead by walking alongside, and you can lead from pushing behind. And in all three, when you lead from the front, I think that's more education. When you lead from the side, I think that's more compassion. And I think when you lead from behind, when you're pushing, I think that's motivation, okay? So during this time of civil unrest, and in particular, because a lot of us are away from our players, I think this is a time of compassion, okay? Yeah. It really and truly is. Yeah. For our Black students, okay, for our minority students, I think there needs to be a lot of love and compassion and understanding, okay? And meaning behind what they're feeling and validating that, okay? And I've been a part of those conversations. I really have. By also stressing too that if you're going to protest, which is your right to do, just do it safely, because you don't want to do something where negative consequences will be rendered to you, and it could ruin your career. So you got to be careful. There's a way to do it. Okay. I think with our white players in particular, you know, Mike, and I just had a conversation today, and I'm just being truthful with you, being honest with you, transparent. one of our white players said, "Coach, I just don't know what to do." And I said, "You know what? You don't really need to know what to do. You don't. You know, no one's blaming you. Just again, love, grieve, okay, listen, okay, and we will work together to try to find active solutions. All right, really, that's what it is. I myself, I can't hold, you know, Jamie Dixon responsible for what happens in the streets to me. Okay, because quite honestly, that may not have been his existence. I can't look at our players and ascribe or attribute racial inequality and injustice to them. They may not even know. They may not even know what they're feeling or why people are feeling this way. So I just think this is a time where we take pause and we exercise those things that help build bridges, not create walls. We've had too many walls, and we have to come together with solutions. We do. And I think we also have to have constant communication, because when you don't communicate, what is left in that void typically turns into negativity. Okay. So on both sides of the fence, we just have to determine, how do you want to lead? And I think this is a time where we all have to be compassionate, where we all have to understand, where we all have to grieve, and we all have to move forward with solutions. And I think we have to be creative about those solutions. You know, I think within our own areas, within our own communities, there are people that are dying to work with our young people and give us valuable information that can help us all get better and respect one another. That's how I would answer the question, Mike. You know, it is a very complex situation that we're in, and it is multifaceted, multi-layered.
That was great, Coach. Definitely a great answer to end on.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, that was great, Coach. Great advice, and definitely great words of wisdom during the time where everybody's kind of looking at Coach, and great wisdom you shared. Appreciate everybody for joining in on us and joining in with us. We'll be on next week again at around the same time. And yeah, thanks so much again for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, brother. You're welcome. Thanks for having me, everybody. You know, and feel free to share my number.
Thanks to Rising Coaches for having this event. And Coach B, forward and follow your career, man.
All right, brother. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.